So today we're just going to be continuing our study of attitudes, and we're basically only covering one topic today, which is the factors that influence attitude formation. So this isn't going to take very long. It is quite an in-depth topic in the textbook, but when you really kind of boil it down, it's not that much that you need to know. It's really just important that you take heed of all the examples in each slide and you really understand how do these factors influence the formation of attitudes? How do they lead to attitudes forming in people in the first place? Okay, so that's basically what today's topic is about. Now you can use the memory tip ROCS, so ROCS, to remember the four the four factors that influence attitudes. And so if you look at this diagram on the slide now, it stands for R is for the repeated exposure, O is for operant conditioning, C is for classical conditioning, and S is for social learning. And unlike some of the other topics we've done in this unit, 3 of these topics you're actually going to repeat next year, not with reference to attitudes, but just in general. You're going to learn about the learning theories of operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and social learning, otherwise known as observational learning, next year in Unit 3. So this will give you a kind of a hint or an insight into what those topics will be like next year. Repeated exposure, you only do this year. Okay, so these are the 4 factors that influence attitude formation. So let's have a look at each of them now in a little bit more depth. The first one is called repeated exposure. So repeated exposure is this basic idea that the more you're exposed to something, or the more repeatedly you're exposed to something again and again, time after time, you are going to be more likely to form a positive attitude towards it. And so the idea or the basic premise is that the more exposure you have to a GOPI, so group, object, person, issue, or event, the more likely or the more positive your attitude will be of that particular thing. Okay, so sometimes, you know, when kids are like, I don't even like that food, or I don't even like this, I don't even like going to this place. And parents are often like, well, have you actually tried it? Like, have you actually given it a go? So this basic idea that when you give things a go, when you try things, when you open yourself to new ideas and you're exposed to those ideas again and again, there's going to be a high chance that you actually like that particular thing and form a positive attitude towards it rather than a negative one. And we can apply this to almost anything. We can even apply it to things like acceptance of other people. We can even apply it to things like Boxing Day sales. Okay, you might not know, but when Boxing Day sales first started off, they weren't really a big deal. In fact, they were just about getting rid of excess stock at the end of the year. But the way that the media marketed it, the way that different stores marketed it and advertised it, kind of led to people being more exposed to this thing of Boxing Day sales are the best sales in the world. And so essentially this then led to more people forming a positive attitude towards Boxing Day sales. Same thing with coffee. Coffee wasn't always a really big thing around the world. Obviously, it was always kind of a big thing in Melbourne, but around the world, it wasn't such a huge thing. But as it started to pop up in more movies, as it started to be the kind of sophisticated beverage of choice, you know, in popular culture, more people started to form a positive attitude towards it. Okay, same thing with songs. If you think about the really annoying songs that have come up across the years, when you first listen to them, you're like, oh my God, this is so annoying. But then the more you're exposed to that particular song or that particular singer or artist, you are going to form a more positive attitude towards it. Or you actually like, you know what, this song is really annoying, but it's kind of like catchy. It's kind of got a good tune to it or something like that. Okay, same thing with fast food outlets. The more we are exposed to fast food outlets like Macca's, the more we are likely to form a positive attitude towards it. And even when we go to a foreign country, when we see Macca's, we kind of feel like, oh, you know what, that's something I know. Let me go there. Let me buy something from them rather than exploring the local outlets. Okay, so repeated exposure is a good thing. It's a good thing because the more we're exposed to something, the more we will form a positive attitude towards it. However, it can also be a bad thing. It can be bad because when you're constantly being exposed to something like a particular artist or a particular ad on TV, you might actually end up finding that annoying. Okay, you might actually be like, oh my God, this is all up in my face. This is This ad never stops. It's always going on and on. And so when you start to see, especially on YouTube, when you see the same ad on every single video that you click, you can actually start to, rather than form a positive attitude towards that, you actually start to form a negative attitude towards that. Like, this ad is so annoying. I see this ad all the time. Okay, so this is why it is important for established companies to change their style of advertising, to change the kind of actors they might use in their advertising, to change the general idea. Even when it comes to products, you know, Macca's is always introducing new products. It's not just, they've always got their classic stuff, but then they're always introducing new things to appeal to new people. Okay, so that's what repeated exposure is, the basic idea that the more we're exposed to a group, object, person, issue, or event, the more likely we are to form a positive attitude towards that. And we're more likely to like it and have a positive judgment towards it. The next factor that influences an attitude formation is operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning, like I said at the beginning, this is a topic that you will cover as a general learning theory next year when you do Unit 3 Psych. So something that, just to give you guys an advance kind of notice about, you will see this again next year as well. Now, attitudes are, when we talk about attitudes and how they're formed through operant conditioning, what we're basically saying is that we are more likely to form attitudes when we are given a consequence for that attitude, okay? And depending on whether we were positively reinforced, we received a positive reinforcement like a reward, or whether we were negatively, whether we received a negative consequence like a punishment, we will then either continue to show that attitude or not continue to show that attitude. And I'll give you 2 examples. The simple idea is, do we get rewarded, that is positively reinforced, or punished for showing a particular attitude? And depending on whether we get rewarded or punished, that attitude will either disappear if we get punished, or that attitude will either continue to be demonstrated if we get rewarded. Now, in the first example here, if your parents are super, if you're a kid and your parents are super passionate about the environment and about keeping clean, and then they see you outside one day just chucking rubbish around, littering, and really enjoying that, you might then get scolded at home by your mum. And your mum might give you a lecture about it and make you feel bad, and you might end up crying, okay? And that essentially would be an example of a punishment, because you're actually getting told off for what you did. As a result of getting told off for what you did, you might feel guilty. You might actually understand that what you did was wrong. And so this behavior, which was basically the behavior that I don't care about the environment, and my behavior of littering reflects that, is now followed by a consequence that is negative. That is a consequence of punishment. And so for this reason, that this little boy here is very unlikely to litter again in the future. So his attitude as a result of this experience has been shaped. So he will now probably care a little bit more about the environment, or at least maybe he won't show behavior like littering in front of his parents or in places where his parents would be able to see him. This other example with Bart Simpson here is about, looking at like studies. So if, for example, Bart Simpson is failing a few of his tests, and that kind of shows a negative attitude, or that reflects a negative attitude that he has towards his studies, and his parents are not happy about that. Let's say his Christmas time is coming up. So he wants to do really well on his next test so he can get the Game Boy that he wants for Christmas. So he studies really hard, puts in all his effort, and eventually there's a positive effect of that he's able to get a really good mark on his test. And obviously, as a result of that, his mum will buy him the Game Boy. So that acts as the positive reinforcement or the reward. Okay. And because of this, because Bart got what he wanted as a result of studying hard and doing well and pleasing his parents, he will probably study hard for the next test as well, thinking that if I study hard for the next test and do well, my parents will again get me something I want, like a present or something like that. Okay, so that's essentially what operant conditioning is about. Attitudes are formed through operant conditioning because of the consequences that we have, and those consequences can be positive or negative in nature. If they're positive, like a reward, we are more likely to repeat that attitude or repeat the behavior that reflects that attitude of studying hard, of working hard. If it's a negative consequence, like a punishment that we get for that behavior, then we are very likely to stop the behavior that reflects the attitude of not caring for the environment or any other example there. Okay, so that's operant conditioning. It's all about the role of consequences. Okay, how do consequences for my behavior then determine my future behavior and my future demonstration of that attitude? The next learning theory, or the next factor that influences attitude formation, is classical conditioning. Now, classical conditioning is another learning theory that you will cover next year in Unit 3 psychology as well. So when we're looking at classical conditioning is this basic idea that we tend to form associations. Okay, classical conditioning is about how we learn things about a particular object or group or issue or event by forming associations between two different events, and how these two different events are paired together again and again and again over time. So kind of similar to this concept of repeated exposure, except that you've got two different events which are now being associated with each other. And I'll give you the example. So you've got all these things of Coca-Cola here. Ever since Coca-Cola became like a global brand, it was all about advertising it as the cool beverage to have, or kind of like it's like it always appeals to youth. It's the beverage of choice for young people everywhere. It's the beverage of choice for the modern person. So they're always trying to associate Coca-Cola with positive connotations. They're always trying to associate drinking Coke with being a young person, okay, being youthful. They're always trying to associate drinking Coke with being with the times or being a cool person. They're always trying to associate Coke with being something that carefree people have. Okay, and if you look at all these ads, all these images, you can see that all these images kind of reflect that. Okay, you've always got young people that are advertised in all of these ads here. I'll just use a different color. Okay, even in this really old ad, I don't know if you can see this, but it says it's refreshing when young folks get their heads together. What's refreshing? Ice cold Coca-Cola, of course. So even this ad, which is probably from, I don't even know, like maybe in the 1900s, is still talking about the fact that Coca-Cola is a drink of the young people. Okay, all these young artists and singers and groups, they're all ambassadors or kind of like endorsers of Coca-Cola. Okay, even this old ad shows two young people kind of running down the street carefree. Okay, all of this stuff is basically showing you how Coke, from the beginning of time when they first established themselves as a brand, always try to associate themselves with other different events. So Coke being linked to being youthful, Coke being linked to being cool, Coke being linked to being carefree, without a worry in the world. Okay, so essentially, when we look at Coca-Cola and we see these ads, we associate Coca-Cola with these positive feelings, okay, such as joy. We associate Coca-Cola with nostalgia, with good times, like being young, or, you know, the youth stage of the lifespan. So essentially, that's what classical conditioning is, making an association between one product or one event and another particular stimuli. Okay, other examples could be that whenever you see activewear advertised, okay, even though most people just kind of lounge around the house with their leggings or their activewear, you know, activewear is often advertised as being something that really active people like athletes will wear, even though most people will generally just wear it around the house or wear it to go shopping. Okay, so essentially that's what classical conditioning is. It's about making an association between two different events, between the thing that we're forming an attitude for and something that that product represents. Okay, certain singers as well, we tend to associate, you know, certain things with them. So when we think about like a high ponytail, we automatically think of Ariana. When we think of, you know, activewear, we automatically think of, you know, someone like running down an athletic track, someone at the gym. Okay, although necessarily we don't have to think about these things. We've just been conditioned to associate one product or one brand or one person with a particular thing. So that's classical conditioning, and that is a topic that you will do again in Unit 3 as well next year. All right, and the last topic we're going through for today, or the last factor that influences attitude formation, is called social learning. So social learning is also called observational learning, okay? And it's also called observational learning because it's focused on how we observe other people and how our attitudes can be influenced by how we observe other people. So next year, when you do observational learning, you're also going to learn that observational learning is another word for social learning, okay? We call it social learning as well because a lot of the time who we observe is dependent on who is around us within our social context or within the social environment. Okay, so it's not just a simple case of monkey see, monkey do. It's not just a simple case that this boy sees his dad reading the newspaper and just takes out a little piece of reading for himself. It's not just that this girl sees her mum cooking and then decides that she wants to cook for herself or she has a positive attitude towards cooking. It's not just that the child sees the mother exercising and decides, you know what, I'm going to have a proactive attitude towards exercising as well. It's not just about observing someone else's attitudes. It's about observing the consequences that they receive for those attitudes as well. So to give you an example with reference to what we looked at now, if this lady is very active and, you know, the daughter always sees other people praising the mother. So whenever they go shopping and they run into a friend of the lady's like, wow, you're so fit, you're so active, I wish I was like you. And the daughter's observing all of this. The daughter's observing how everyone is praising her mother for being an active person, for continuing to exercise. So the daughter essentially wants to then be like the mother because she realizes that what the mother is doing is something good, is something that other people are praising or, in other words, rewarding her for. And as a result of that, the daughter also starts to develop a positive attitude towards exercise. Okay, same thing with the first picture here. If this man is maybe a reporter for a newspaper, or maybe he's just someone who's really well educated or well read, and people often come to him for advice or ask him questions, and the son kind of gets an idea that, you know, he's someone that people look up to, the son might want to then be like him because he's someone that people are praising and people are basically looking up to and holding in a high regard. Okay, with reference to the actual example on the slide here, when we're looking at this example, it says that if a girl whose mother shows a positive attitude towards cooking, so let's say this mum loves cooking, okay, she's always loved cooking, it's just one of her basically things that she enjoys. Okay, so essentially, if this mum loves cooking and she shows a positive attitude towards cooking, and whenever she cooks a meal, the whole family is praising her cooking. They're like, wow, the lasagna you made today is so nice, or wow, the curry you made today is so nice. Essentially, this girl is observing all of this. And this girl is then likely to also want to cook in the future. She wants to be like her mum. She wants to also cook meals where everyone will praise her. She wants to also enjoy cooking in the same way that she sees her mother enjoying cooking. So she's likely to form a positive attitude towards cooking in the same way that her mother now demonstrates that positive attitude. Okay, you can take this example and flip it the other way as well. You could say that if this mother completely hates cooking, that's supposed to be an angry face. If this mother completely hates cooking and she's just like super angry about it and it's not love, it's like completely like she's completely disgusted by this idea of cooking, then obviously this girl will not form a positive attitude towards cooking. She'll actually form a negative attitude towards cooking, and she probably won't want to cook a meal for the rest of her life. She'll probably be like, yeah, I'm just going to Uber Eats it for the rest of my life because cooking is just something that I've never seen as something that's enjoyable. Okay, obviously our attitudes can change. So later on when she watches maybe MasterChef, when she gets older, when she sees her other like roommates or stuff cooking after she goes to uni, or when she sees her aunt cooking, maybe her attitudes can change, okay? So attitudes are not always rigid, they're not always static, they can change throughout our lifespan. And again, a lot of these examples are with reference to children and their parents, but when we look at, for example, with reference to how you learn from your peers, okay? If you're in assembly and one of your friends gets a merit award for being a good person, for helping others, you know, for getting the most merit points, you might then look at them and you might see how everyone is praising them, and you might be like, you know what, I want to work towards getting a merit award next time as well. So it's not always just parents and children that we can use an example, but even like our peers, even our friends, even our siblings as well. Okay, so that's essentially what social learning is about. It's about how we form attitudes based on observing other people's behaviors, as well as observing what kind of consequences they receive for their behavior. So social learning, as you'd notice, because it talks a little bit about consequences, you do have a little kind of element of operant conditioning within this learning theory as well. Okay, so that's essentially what social learning is about. Okay, get rid of these scribbles. Right, and that basically brings us to the end of today's lesson. So this is the rest of the work that we have to do for today.